What's up, everybody? This is your boy TL. This is your Week 9 fantasy football preview. Um, this week I have 2 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, 7 wide receivers, 4 tight ends, and 7 defenses that I like. Starting with the defenses because they're the most boring. I like Cincinnati, Cleveland, Kansas City, New Orleans, Carolina, Seattle, and Green Bay. The reason for that, looking at the schedule, Cincinnati is playing Miami. Miami is the most sacked team in the NFL, and Cincinnati is coming off a very dominant defensive game against the Jets. Cleveland's playing at home against Baltimore. Cleveland had a very impressive game against Kansas City last week, so I look for more of the same, especially at home. Kansas City is playing at Buffalo. Buffalo is just, I mean, they're playing with backup quarterbacks and stuff like that, and they're a dominant defense, so it's kind of a no-brainer. New Orleans is at the Jets. Obviously, the Jets showed how sloppy they can be on offense, and New Orleans is playing very well right now. Um, Carolina is at home against Atlanta. Atlanta is just in trouble, and I mean, Carolina's a very good defense and probably top 5 defense in my opinion. So I look for Atlanta to have a long day on Sunday. Um, Seattle's kind of a no-brainer. Anything Seattle at home versus anybody doesn't matter. Pick Seattle. And then last but not least, Green Bay. They're playing on Monday Night Football against Chicago. Chicago's playing with their backup quarterback, and so I look for them to make a lot of plays. Moving on to more fun stuff. Quarterbacks. I only have 2 this week that aren't no-brainers. Jason Campbell from my Browns and Terrell Pryor. Jason Campbell, as I said, is playing at home against Baltimore. He had a very solid game against the Chiefs. He threw 2 touchdowns, no picks. Was only sacked once, which was surprising. Terrell Pryor, as you know, beat the Steelers at home. Not a very good arm, ran all over the place. But fantasy-wise, he's doing good enough that he's worth a start if you have a bye week or an injury. Moving on to running backs, there's only 3 that I have this week. One of them is kind of a question mark. Zach Stacy from the Rams. I watched him last night, and he impressed me. I mean, he's a north-south runner. He fights for extra yards. He had well over 100 yards rushing, but he got banged up towards the end of the game, and I'm not sure if that injury is going to keep him out. So you have to check on that status, but he looked very good to me. The other 2 guys is Tolbert from Carolina and James from Tampa Bay. Now the thing to keep in mind is James is going to be temporary. They're hoping that Doug Martin comes back around week 11. It's week 9 now, so if you pick up James, just know that it's going to be temporary. But I mean, fantasy-wise, he puts up, some rushing yards and receiving yards. So that's nice to have as far as all around. And Tolbert kind of surprised me. I watched the Carolina game, and he got a decent amount of touches. I mean, for a big guy, he's kind of a fullback. But, I mean, if they threw him the ball, they gave him handoffs. So, I mean, he got enough touches that he's worth picking up. Especially, I mean, a goal line back like him, he's kind of a TD, hijacker. So he's worth picking up. Anyways, moving on to receivers, I have 7 of those, by far the biggest position this week. The guys that I like, no-brainer, Marvin Jones from Cincinnati, Dwayne Bowe just this week, Patterson from the Vikings, Stills from New Orleans, Teddy Ginn, actually, Golden Tate from Seattle, and last but not least, Hayward Bay from the Colts. The reasons for these guys, Jones is a no-brainer. Obviously, he had 4 touchdowns, which is ridiculous, and over 100 yards. Will he do that every week? Of course not. Mohamed Sanu is banged up right now, so I think that he will continue to have stats because obviously all the teams are going to double team A.J. Green, so he's the guy that gets the man-on-man coverage. Dwayne Bowe, the only reason I'm saying to start him, I know I've said him before, and he's kind of burnt maybe you, definitely me. The reason I would say start him this week is because they're playing the Bills, and the Bills don't have a very good secondary. Patterson is pretty much making it very obvious to the Vikings that he has playmaking ability, and so I look at them. I look to the Vikings to implement him more in their offense going forward. Kenny Stills from New Orleans, it's kind of, he had a great game, over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. The thing is Drew Brees is very inconsistent with who he throws the ball to. So it's always going to be who's open. So will Kenny Stills be open next week? Who knows? But I know he had a great week this week, and he showed all the physical ability to get the job done. Moving on to Ted Ginn. Ted Ginn is kind of tricky. He'll have a game where he gives you like 30 yards, and then another game where he gives you 80 and a touchdown. So it's kind of hit or miss, but what I've noticed is he's been a lot more consistent this year than he ever has been in his career. So I think, based on everybody's going to double team Steve Smith, Ted Ginn does get one-on-one coverage, and he can outrun anybody in the league. So I think Cam Newton knows that, and he's going to continue to throw him the ball. Moving on to Golden Tate from Seattle. Golden Tate obviously had a big game last night, had 2 touchdowns. He taunted the guy on the second touchdown. I'm not into that taunting and, bad sportsmanship, so I don't like him personally. I wouldn't pick him up because of that, but he does seem to be Russell Wilson's go-to receiver, so for what it's worth. Hayward Bay, obviously Reggie Wayne's out for the season. Hayward Bay obviously is not Reggie Wayne, but Andrew Luck's got to throw it to somebody. So Luck's going to throw it to Hilton, but he's going to throw it to Fleener, and he's going to throw it to Hayward Bay. Will he catch the ball? He definitely won't catch the ball like Wayne did, but he's going to get targets regardless. So we'll see. Moving on to tight ends, last but not least, there's only 4 tight ends that I like this week. First is Chandler. Chandler, I think 2 weeks ago, he had like 11 targets from his quarterback, so that's a lot for a tight end. Just based on that, is good enough to pick him up. Rudolph, I watched the Vikings game. I noticed that he was kind of the security blanket when things broke down. The quarterback looked for him, and he's a good big red zone target. Reed from Washington. Reed has had 2 weeks solid in a row. He is going to have more of the same. I think RG3 trusts him, so he's going to get a lot of looks the rest of the season. And last but not least, Fleener from the Colts. Like I said, Reggie Wayne goes out for the season. Luck's got to throw it to somebody, and he's kind of running out of people to throw it to. So Hilton's a no-brainer. After that, Hayward Bay, Fleener, they both need to catch the ball. If they can, big stats. But that's it, guys. This week I had a frustrating fantasy week. I unfortunately went 3-6. Very bad week for me. I had a whole bunch of players underperform, so I'm a bit annoyed for the moment. But that just motivates me more for next week. But anyways, I wish you all the best of luck this week, and I'll talk to you next week. All right? Go Browns. Peace.